The mighty 15th day of January 2024. I'm going to be a host tonight, Dana Durnford. Hope you're having a great day, and feel free to call in. All lines are currently open. 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. We got a hum-diggy-diggy dunga here. Lots of nuclear, lots of earthquake, lots of madness to get through. We dressed it up a little bit for you today. We still haven't seen any construction equipment or construction workers cleaning up the area. And basically, you got better chances of seeing a unicorn than you do of seeing the government showing up and doing something. It's a sad day when that's the reality. You're 15 days into an earthquake, and the help is still not there for many tens of thousands. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Does the disgusting nuclear industry have way too many degenerate, despicable, mass murdering scumbags? I think that's a reasonable poll. I hope you're like me too. When the show was over last night, we had 20 views. 20 views. We had 48 likes, but we only had 20 views. We had 160 people on the show, but we only had 20 views. And if you notice, the show was 2 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds. 12 hours later, that's 10 hours. I smurfed that up already, did I? Just bear with me. That's the way it goes some days. Some days they're diamonds, some days they're diamonds. And so 12 hours later, my videos magically get longer. And so we had an extra 5 seconds added onto my video. And this is typical after 12 hours. I don't see that happening in anybody else's video. We're assuming they're putting some kind of program in the video, most likely to track the people that are watching the video. Should nuclear power plants, I know that might sound bizarre to you, but hang around, it gets much more bizarre. It's nuclear after all. Should nuclear power plants be erased from Japan due to the endless massive earthquakes and tsunamis? That was the poll last night. We had 54 votes, but we only had 20 people on the show when the show was over. Now, normally I would get like 150 views, but over the last month they stopped giving me any views. They give it to other people, though. Always takes me a minute or 3 or 4 to get up to crushing speed. Here we go. I'm just going to take you back through the time machine for some important headlines. And this was early on. The earthquake registered the highest level of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, which is 7. So it's a 7 out of a 7. In the town of Shika, which is where there's a nuclear power plant, we believe 2 fuel pools at the top of reactor 1 have melted down. And maybe reactor 2 also. But certainly number 1 reactor. We believe there's around 10 reactor cores have melted down in the town of Shika. And so Shika nuclear power plant and the Niigata is corresponding to those arrows. And they're both very, very close to the Eurasian plate and the North American plate. And despite the fact this is a 4,000-year-old fault line that hasn't ruptured, rather for 3,000 to 4,000 years, it has ruptured. And the devastation on the entire Noto Peninsula has been devastating, to say the least. There was actually 4 plates there. In Suzu, which is at the top of the Noto Peninsula to the right, a town of just over 5,000 households near the quake's epicenter. 90% of the houses may have been destroyed, according to the mayor. Now, the mayor is there, so why would he make it up? The media stopped reporting on that after day 3, and this is 12 days later, and we still haven't heard any more reports. But the mayor is saying 4,500 houses have collapsed or destroyed. Out of the 15 days, 12 days they used the word tremor almost consistently worldwide in all the media to describe the earthquakes. In the context of earthquakes, the word tremor is used for non-earthquake seismic rumbling, but not for earthquakes. So they tried very unsuccessfully covered up the majority of people that investigated the story. Ishikawa officials say 1,370 homes were destroyed. That was about 5 days ago. Where that report came out, were completely or partially destroyed. But as I just showed you, the Suzu mayor says 90% of the 5,000 homes are destroyed. This is really interesting because they got housing now for 24,000 families. Now we know there's over 1,200 aftershocks, over 1,200 landslides. We know the peninsula for 85 kilometers have extended itself out, and that picture there actually is showing it. You see the wharf in that picture over there? That's actually dried out now permanently. So the earth lifted up for 820 feet just on the coastline. Obviously, it lifted up in the communities too, but it lifted up 13 feet for 820 of the coastline was extended out. For 85 kilometers through Suzu, Wajima, the Shika in Ishikawa Prefecture. And there's around 250 kilometers of coastline. This is a before and after. So before to your left and after to your right, you can see all the extra coastline. And that what was once a wharf and harbor is now dry. Boats can never go in there again. So this was a pretty significant earthquake. They constantly came out and claimed there was no issues with the local nuclear power plant, but yet the community that is in was a 7 out of a 7. And that, according to the company that owns the Shika nuclear power plant, the quake registered an upper 5 of Japan's maximum 7 on their Shindu seismic intensity scale beneath the number 1 reactor of the plant. So not beneath the number 2 reactor, not beneath anything else in the facility, but underneath the number 1 reactor. That's quite the interesting statement, because earthquakes don't work that way. So were they trying to warn you that the number 1 nuclear power plant is melted down at the fuel pools? I would imagine that's the only thing it could mean, right? And in fact, just a lower 5 on the Japanese scale, because they don't count in increments of 1, is a 7.8 on the Richter scale. So how can you have a 7.8 on the Richter scale in the basement? Or in this case, they're saying beneath it, but now we have headlines saying in the basement, the actual basement, from the Japan Times, no less. And Shika, you can see Shika way over there. But an upper 5, which is what they claim, would be an 8.4 on the Richter scale. If you have an 8.4, it ain't going to be isolated to a basement or beneath a single building. Japan says the earthquake shook the nuclear plant past its safety limits. The nuclear power plant in Shika, in Ishikawa Prefecture, took the brunt of the devastating 7.6 magnitude earthquake that claimed at that point over 200 lives. which is these are all amazing statements. You can see the damage in this community. This is Wajima. But you don't see any heavy equipment. You're not seeing the fire trucks. There are some hoses in this particular picture, which is quite rare. But you're not seeing backhoes. You're not seeing excavators. You're not seeing bulldozers. You're not seeing equipment you would use to clear the roads. You're not seeing the roads cleared. And we're seeing that in every single community. In Suzu, this is in the first 3 days, this story was repeated in all the media, and multiple people had interviewed the mayor, medias. Suzu, a town of about 5,000 households, near the quake's epicenter, 90% of the houses may have been destroyed, according to the mayor. Japan quake death toll rises to 73 as the search for survivors go on. It registered the highest level of 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. So if you got a 10 of a 10 on the Richter scale, how bad is it? Ask yourself that question. And then apply that to the town with a nuclear power plant, which is Shika in this case. But look at the road, at the destruction of the road. And just give me 1 second. I got to stand up for 1 second. My apologies. That's the way it goes. My chair is giving me problems this last week. I don't know what the hell is wrong with it. Let me fix this. So this whole lot is lifted up. It's not just the cracks you're looking at. The actual lot is lifted up. And there was liquefaction, which is why you're seeing the telephone poles tipped over a lot of the times. You might not see the damage, but you'll see all these telephone poles tipped over. That's from what's known as liquefaction, where the sand is literally turned into, because of the shaking, is turned into it acts like water, let's put it that way. And the mayor reported a grim scene in the coastal city of Suzu, stating that almost no houses are standing. That's a town, not counting businesses, but 5,000 houses. And 90% of the town's houses are either entirely or nearly destroyed. Entirely or nearly. Not damaged, but entirely or nearly destroyed. And described the situation as truly catastrophic. And so the question is, why didn't we hear about this after 3 days? Why was this silent? Why did this go silent after 3 days? Why would the mayor, who just survived an earthquake, lie about it? Well, he didn't, did he? Why did all the media come out with this story for 3 days? And why didn't the media repeat this story after 3 days? Because of the nuclear power plant, right? Fuel pool must have melted down at the Shika nuclear power plant. Aftershocks continue in the quake zone, Japan's earthquake. And look at the destruction in some of these places where the buildings completely collapsed. This is a 3,000 or 4,000 year old fault line that has never, in human history, given way, right? And so now all of a sudden in Suzu, a town of just over 5,000 households near the quake's epicenter, 90% of the houses may have been destroyed, according to the mayor. And they were literally turned into matchsticks. I dug up all these headlines from the first 3 days because we talked about it a lot, and we're still talking about it unbelievably. All these days later, 15 days later, and people still haven't been rescued. Tons and tons of people still haven't been rescued. No water. In fact, 30,000 people were surviving on a slice of bread and a cup of water. Not a glass of water, but one of those small paper cups, a cup of water. That's all they get a day. And that was all the way up until day 12, if they were lucky to get that. And so landslides, I mean, when you think about landslides, you don't really, it's hard to appreciate it. But look at the incredible damage. Look how the road is just like broken like a glass breaks. It's unbelievable. The fires in Wajima burnt 200 homes and businesses that have been a district for about 1,000 years. A tsunami. And the tsunami would have been worse if the coastline wasn't lifted up 13 feet and extended out 820 feet, 250 meters. And then the damage from the fire is unbelievable. Caused no problems at the local nuclear power plant. And again, here it is, they're talking about registered an upper 5 of maximum 7 on the seismic intensity scale beneath the number 1 reactor of the power plant, the nuclear power plant. No, but see, there's 2 reactors. How can you have it under 1 reactor? The fault line was about 150 kilometers. Yeah, 150 kilometers long. And look at these roads here. Imagine that's where the nuclear power plant is too. Imagine that's underneath the nuclear power plant where this is happening. Think about the tsunami, how powerful it was and how powerful it would have been if the Earth didn't rise up 13 feet and extend out 820 feet, drawing out many harbors for 85 kilometers. If that Earth didn't extend out, there would have been an incredible amount of deaths. And then just the crumbled buildings, we still got no tally from Suzu. We still got complete denial from Suzu, where the mayor said they're completely or almost destroyed, not damaged. The rest there wasn't a house left standing, is how the mayor put it. Why did they stop reporting on that after 3 days? Because we've covered this, all the news cycle. I've grabbed everything for 15 days in English. And I just thought I'd bring back some pictures so everybody can comprehend the story if you're not quite familiar with it, if you haven't been following it. These people are traversing a landslide, trying to get out. And we've covered quite a few stories about people like that, how they found shelters and they were stuck in places. And the question we asked when we've seen this picture is, what's going through her mind? Just absolute heartbreak, I'm sure. So devastation was real. This is unbelievable stuff we're looking at. This building actually jumped off its foundation. What it had major steel pipes embedded deep underground for earthquakes. And in order for the building to tip, it had to literally rise above the stakes, and then it can tip over. We've never seen anything like it. Search presses on for earthquake survivors. And look at this devastation, how things just ripped apart. It was 150 kilometers of one fault line alone. This was obviously tsunami damage. And another landslide. You can see her roads are just completely displaced. This was tsunami damage also. It was so difficult to actually get documentation. And how houses... There's aftershocks every 7 minutes for at least the first 10 days. It's very difficult to go in a building when there's massive aftershocks, right? And we got the 5 or 6 more than we start on today's news cycle, which is going to be we're going to cover some nuclear stories too today, because we normally just cover nuclear. And because we got a nuclear meltdown that's covered up, and it's hard to comprehend that there's that kind of evil going on out there, that there's actually, they would cover up a nuclear meltdown. It seems pretty crazy. Now, how could they do it, Dana? It's, right, it can't be done, Dana. Well, they've done it before. This is 4 out of many, many major medias have come out and pretended they're in the fuel pool to the building to your left, which is number 4 reactor at Fukushima. They covered that up. They claim they got all the fuel out of a pool that actually doesn't physically exist. And just let me play this little clip. It's only 40 seconds long. I put together to help articulate the story where they're going to pretend they're in the fuel pool to the left, which would be about 120, 130 feet above the stump to the left.
Where I was standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So how many people think those people are in the fuel pool at the top of the building? Let's check out the poll. We're here, might as well say hi to people. Hi, Stephen Young. And you're lovely, of course. Hi, Richard. PBS see some bumps and dents, which is what the media was saying about the Shika nuclear power plant. Port Angeles. Hi, everybody. John Curtis. Fast Thinker. Gabriel. And if I miss anybody, my apologies, because I'm looking all over the place. Peaceware. And Katja. And Dana Nasana, your moderator. And a good friend here. Kiri. Hi, everybody. And James Lucid, of course. Hi, James. We know water slipped out of the spent fuel pool. James he's got a good habit of cracking me up with these little comments he makes. It's appropriate sarcasm, I think, is what we can call it. I call it. And Tab Bat. And an unusual name call out in the middle of a show. Don Vincent. Hi, everybody. Starlight. And Vitra. And I was afraid I'm going to miss somebody. And Joey. And I can't see the comments above it because of the poll, which is what we came over. Does the disgusting nuclear industry have way too many degenerate, despicable, mass-murdering scumbags? I don't know what you think of that, Dana. That's a crazy poll. But if you hang around the nuclear industry for a little tiny bit, that's what you're left with. That's the reality of it. And the mayor in Suzu said he revealed that approximately 90% of the town's houses are either entirely or nearly destroyed, and described the situation as truly catastrophic. Now, this story here is insane. This is the Japan Times. The Japan Times, which is the government itself in Japan. I covered this several days ago, but I want to do a recap a little bit tonight on some of this stuff. The quake measured an upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale in the basement, which is 7. So it's a 5.9 out of a 7, basically. In the basement, at the basement of the number 1 reactor building, where the 2 fuel pools we believe have melted down, of its Shika nuclear power plant in Shikawa Prefecture. And so it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around a statement, because imagine an earthquake, a massive earthquake that can topple skyscrapers happening in the basement of a nuclear power plant. But not number 2 reactor, not anywhere else on the site, not in Shika town, but in the basement of the number 1 reactor. They're trying to tell somebody, or you, that are paying attention, that the number 1 reactor, because it can't survive that the number 1 reactor fuel pools have melted down. Because that kind of earthquake, a reactor can't survive it. I don't care whose house it is, it can't survive it. Like, you can't have an earthquake in the basement. In the basement. It's like, so they're trying to warn you that they have a meltdown of 2 fuel pools. Each fuel pool could have at least 5 reactor cores. It could have a lot more. And the reason that the fuel pools would have that much is because you don't have a repository for nuclear fuel anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. So they're kept in the fuel pools, which are located at the top of the buildings. The buildings are 190 feet, 65 meters tall. I'm going to turn down the volume and have a big... And lately I've been forgetting to turn the volume down. I apologize for it. Now, Shika done the same trick along that coastline. See the coastline over there? That's before. Here it is after, where 820 feet of new coastline has showed up and has risen up 13 feet. And so if there's a nuclear power plant right here, all of a sudden it can't get water. You just tore apart everything, all the infrastructure on top of that. And because it's not just going to be the coastline, it's going to be interior too, right? And we know 85 kilometers of the coastline. All right, so here we go. Here we go. Now we're up to today's news. 2 weeks after the Noto quake, avoiding disaster-related deaths remain an issue. Well, it hasn't remained an issue so far. You've abandoned them for 15 days. That's what you've done. Now, you made all kinds of promises, but you actually abandoned them. There should have been 25 or 30,000 soldiers sent in immediately to try to rescue, especially in the first 72 hours. Japan wouldn't let United States of America military, which is really close by, go in with their search and rescue crew to help people in the crucial 72 hours. They wouldn't let China go in there. They wouldn't let India go in there. They wouldn't let any other countries. They told countries not to ask, not to send. And now they got corporations across Japan are sending blankets and thermal underwear. And there's one company with 100,000 jackets that I covered. Winter jackets, parkas, because the government is not bringing anything. They won't let anybody else send anything. It doesn't make any sense. And so the only thing that makes sense is there's a nuclear meltdown at the fuel pool at the Shika nuclear power plant. They had at least 490 people in 15 communities in Wajima and Suzu, and the town of Noto remained cut off because of severed road access. But they won't be cut off if they used a helicopter, would they? Am I crazy? Am I crazy to think they should use helicopters? Am I insane to suggest that they should use helicopters? That's a question that you better ask yourself, because apparently I'm insane because I think they should use helicopters. That makes me a bad person because I think they should use helicopters. And I thought helicopters was the way to go. I figured that would be the way to do it. Hang on here. Let me bring up one of the older polls we done about that. Japan rescued tens of thousands of quake victims abandoned with no food, water, or heat for 8 days. That was one poll. And then the whole show was about stories of them not rescuing anybody, not helping anybody, not letting anybody else go in there. And let's get one more. It's so much fun, isn't it? Let me see what this poll says. And here was another interesting one. We had another poll asking, does it seem that Japan purposely was leaving the roads blocked to the Shika nuclear power plant to hide the meltdowns of the fuel pools? Because the question was, they got all these communities, they got their own heavy equipment, they could have dug out, the search and rescue coming from one end, and the communities were all digging out. They didn't even clean out their own community streets. They didn't even remove the debris from the streets. I don't understand it. I've never heard of it or seen anything like it. And if this was a Hollywood flick, I would have got up and walked out because it was so implausible. But it's actually reality. This 5-year-old kid said, when I grow up, I will become a hero. And he died from burns from the earthquake in the Noto Peninsula. He was refused admission to a hospital and died while waiting. And he's from Shika, where the nuclear power plant is too. That's the Shika plant there. And I don't know why they highlighted the coastline for. At Google Maps, that's Google Maps. I don't know if I've ever seen them highlight the coastline like that before. But I haven't really checked it in the last year or so. From this point on, so I don't really remember, Kanoto was rejected by hospitals at least 3 times. He was refused an ambulance, I think because of bad roads, but his mom panicked, called an ambulance. We can't dispatch with a burn, they said. We can't send an ambulance for a burn. I mean, you got a lot of people injured everywhere. They tried to go to the hospital by car, but the road was cracked and broken. There was a traffic jam of cars that had left. And basically, the kid was left to die, and then did die. The hospitals couldn't help him or wouldn't help him. This was a car damaged in the town of Shika. So Shika definitely, we know, was a 7 out of a 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, which is 7. These are incredible numbers. And this is Suzu. This town is, this is one of the rare pictures we actually got of the town, where all the media for 3 days say almost every house is either destroyed or almost destroyed. But then the media stopped reporting on it. Why did the media stop reporting on it after 3 days? But yet they reported on Ishikawa, talking about 1,400 houses are destroyed. But why wouldn't you talk about this anymore? And that was one of the rare pictures we got of Shika. And Hawkeye, this is Shika too. Look at the roads torn apart and raised up. I'm not sure where this picture is to. The Japanese are very, very frugal. Now we know this is a tsunami area. We know this is damaged by the tsunami. I remember some of this stuff, and this included. Look at the damage on that road up there, though. Look at how it just tore everything apart. So I don't know what happened here, whether it dropped or risen, but in order to break up pavement that significantly and rip it apart, it's unbelievable earthquake. This is obviously the tsunami, and I'm not sure where this picture is from. I don't read Japanese. Japan to send caregivers to quake-hit understaffed facilities for the elderly people. These are all the headlines for the last little bit are today, right? The send caregivers to quake-hit understaffed facilities. These have been abandoned. They got no heat, got no water, they got no food. They ran into the ground, they got no medication left over, they got nothing. And so they say they're going to do it, but will they do it? That's the question. It also severed the supply of water and electricity, making baths and toilets in many facilities unusable. And that very few people have got a bath or a shower in the last 15 days. So you can imagine how bad it is. You're cold, you're wet, you got no food, you got no water, no electricity. You got no helicopters flying supplies in, dropping it off. Because you don't want pictures leaking out of the nuclear meltdown. Radioactive battery keeps your phone running for 50 years. Raise your hand if you think you're going to still have the same phone in 50 years' time. Oh, I don't see anybody with their hands raised. So you're going to make a battery to keep your phone running for 50 years. This is a Chinese tech firm, Betavolt. So all you got to do now is take the phone and smash it with a hammer and put that in the laundry and poison everybody in the house forever. So they say it won't leak, but unless you crack it open, then guess what happens? Or someone don't want the phone because new ones come out every 6 months or something. Who's going to keep their phone for 50 years? Is there anybody out there? Why would you say radioactive battery keeps your phone running for 50 years when I can't think of a single person out there will tell me they're going to have that phone in 50 years' time. I can guarantee you the phones ain't going to last 50 years, even if you are going to have the same phone. This is the Magic. Going to use nickel-63 for decay energy. Turns into electrical energy. We don't want it. Get it off our friggin'... Put it in a sarcophagus. This stuff is not made by the solar system. This is man-made. Nothing on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. I can guarantee you there's nobody out there wants their phone to run for 50 years after they throw it away. Because most of them are going to throw it away in 4, 5, 6 years at the most. And then the guy who got to replace the screens when the screens are broke on, I got to deal with radioactive batteries. And you gather it up and eventually you got a dirty bomb. Multiple of these, the BVs-100 could power satellites and artificial intelligence programs. So they're talking about batteries for robots that are for nefarious purposes. Now it could be sentient with enough battery to last 50 years to go around like a plague and destroy stuff. We got to stop these people from being so reckless. Are they going to be responsible for the radioactive? Do we send it back to them when we're finished with it? Because nobody's going to keep a phone for 50 years. Japan says nuclear contaminated water is safe. But some New Zealanders don't believe it. And you know what they're talking about? Tritium. They're insane, right? The reactors are actually gone, haven't stopped releasing radiation for 13 years. The majority of the radioactive fuel and reactor cores were gone by day 6. Because they blew up, caught fire and blew up, not necessarily in that order. This is a radioactive fallout map, so if it's melting down in Shika, this is what it's going to look like. I'll tell you when. What it looks like. Bear with me here, hang on. So 15 days, from 11 to the 21st. So this is right there. That's 15 days of radioactive fallout from Shika. Covers most of the planet, right? Well, let it keep coming out for another couple of days, and it covers the entire planet. So Shika would look like this. This is what the radioactive fallout looks like. And so this is day 9 after Shika. And you can see America is almost covered. But by day 15, which is today, the entire northern hemisphere is buried in radioactive fallout from 10 nuclear reactor cores that have melted down in the fuel pools. And that's assuming reactor 2 fuel pools didn't burn also, which is highly likely because there's a unique problem with this stuff. If it detonates, then the assemblies, which are 100 fuel rods, and they are 18 pounds each, so it's 1,800 pounds. They're 12 feet long. And these assemblies become projectiles, lethal projectiles that are pyrophoric. They're catching fire as they're going through the air. The minute they're not underwater, they catch fire and burn at enormous temperatures. More than 2,800 leaders, think of this statement, from 120 countries and territories are expected to take part in the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, which begins today. And the World Economic Forum is Klaus Schwab. He's a former Nazi. And he has co-opted many governments worldwide and have turned them against humanity and the 8 million species. Very concerning. Extraordinarily evil people. Japan's coastline moved over 800 feet after the devastating January 1st earthquake. Over 800 feet. Satellite images capture striking changes in the coastline of Japan's Noto Peninsula following a massive earthquake on New Year's Day. So that's what it looked like before, and that's what it looks like after, where you can see the earth rose up. So before and after. And now you can see that harbor for boats is completely dried out. So that harbor, there's no longer a harbor. The boats can no longer tie up there or get close to it. It's extraordinary, isn't it? And here's another one. And the same thing here. It's an incredible extension of the coastline. Japan's earthquake in January 1st shifted the coastline over 800 feet. Caused significant uplift. Significant uplift. It's an incredible picture of damage. How come they didn't clean it up? And this was like 10 days in. We didn't see any equipment to put fires out. There's nothing left over from search and rescue efforts. It's just a wanderer wandering through, right? A lot of different pictures similar to that we've seen. Over 1,000 people suffered injuries. They had no doctors, no nurses, no medical help from the outside. There was no evacuations. What was the bizarre is there was no search and rescue helicopters going in dropping supplies off. They abandoned tens of thousands of people. We've never seen it before. We wouldn't let international communities go in and do the search and rescue. We've never seen that before. And the only thing that makes sense is they had a nuclear meltdown at the fuel pools at the Shika plant. Because the nuclear industry can't survive, neither can Earth, but the nuclear industry can't survive another nuclear meltdown anywhere on the planet. And we see the uranium stocks being artificially inflated for the last 15 days to give people, and they've done the same thing after Fukushima, right? Still unavailable water, cold weather, water and power still unavailable as of Sunday at hundreds of evacuation sites hosting nearly 20,000 people, and as many shelters in the region are still full. Some residents are forced to brave the wintry conditions in a greenhouse. Well, that's the only shelter they can find. The government revealed, because they won't bring in any I mean, the military helicopters could have brought in, and usually would, and normally always would. You know, Americans wanted to do it. China wanted search and rescues, wanted to bring in dogs and equipment and relief supplies. India was ready to rock and roll, stellar. And the Japanese government said, no, we don't want nobody, nothing. Don't offer us nothing, don't send us nothing, and don't volunteer for nothing. We don't want you. You're not going out there. Only we're going out there, and we're not ready to go out there. And they didn't go out there for 12 days. The roads are still not clear. I've never heard of this before. The government revealed 190 hectares also include areas of the coastal town of Shika, where the nuclear power plant. What an interesting statement. Why would they include that? So 100,000 Afghan children are still in dire need of support. And when you say dire need, if UNICEF is taking care of them, they haven't got a hope in hell of surviving, because UNICEF is UN, right? They have no hope of surviving if they're there. Experts find liquefaction made surface move up to 3 meters in Japan Noto Peninsula earthquake. Made the surface move up to 3 meters. So 3 meters. Right? In different directions you're talking about. It's going to take them decades to rebuild that peninsula. The damage to the houses on the Noto Peninsula, the Ichikawa, is more serious than those in the past. The situation will likely have a large impact on the survivors' ability to restore their livelihood. They have no ability. The government has abandoned them. I'll give them props, because they did find 24,000 homes for 24,000 families that can't, their homes are apparently destroyed. But officially they're only saying 1,400 homes are destroyed. And that number came out long after they stopped talking about the 5,000 homes in Suzu, which I showed you a whole bunch of in the beginning, are destroyed. Indonesian environmental activists protest against Japan's nuclear waste disposal. What are they protesting? They're protesting tritium. The buildings are actually destroyed. You got to protest uranium, plutonium, and americium, and neptunium, and all the important curium isotopes, all the important stuff. You know what was really interesting about Fukushima, for instance, was there wasn't a nuclear scientist on the planet that didn't know the fuel pools and reactor cores were gone. Not a single one. There wasn't a single university that didn't know the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone. And to this day, not a single one has come out and told you. So if you think the media is not controlled, and you don't believe what I'm telling you and showing you, then you're delusional. Japan's earthquake could cost insurers up to $6 billion. Wow, they doubled the number. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Just the houses that they acknowledged, the families displaced, if you lowball the prices of the houses, you're talking about $6 billion. They've been lowballing the rate in order to try to minimize what happened there. They refused for 12 days now to acknowledge there's almost 5,000 destroyed houses in Suzu. I've never seen this before, see? Why did Sprout Physical Uranium, junior uranium miners, pop last week? Because they're trying to cover up Shika nuclear meltdown. They're artificially inflating it. It was a dirty trick that the Sprout Uranium done 2 years ago in order to jack uranium stocks up a little bit. They got on the stock market with no physical material. They raised $1 billion, went out and bought $1 billion worth of physical uranium. And then they didn't try to flip it. They left it where it was. They didn't take possession of it. They just took it off the market. And this created an artificial demand for physical yellow cake, which is coming from the mining company itself, hasn't gone through a chain reaction or processing or anything else. It's just the stuff coming right from the mining company, the 308. And so by doing that, they artificially forced the mining companies to start producing. And if you didn't do it, uranium would still be $40 a pound, right? And so then they raised a whole bunch of money and done it again. And so each time they done it, the stocks went up a little tiny bit more. Now they got a profit guaranteed. And now they made 3 times their money in 2 years. And just if they sold it raw like it was, never done nothing to it, they made $2 billion profit. But that wasn't good enough. They raised more money, and a massive amount of money the next time, and artificially inflated it again. And so they got all kinds of investors who didn't know any better, thought, hey, uranium stocks are looking really good. So they'd spend their pensions on that, and then after a couple of weeks, the price dives. And so they panic, sell their shares for next to nothing. Sprout Uranium Physical Trust buys up the stocks, and everything gets recycled again. They sell it off to unsuspecting investors, and then they artificially inflate the stocks again. And we've covered this a lot over the last 13 years. Moltex recycling process granted a Canadian patent. Moltex is a British company that showed up here in Canada, and the New Brunswick government created a private corporation business, a numbered business, not a physical name business either, just a numbered business, and gave them $10 million in taxes, I would assume, at the same time, right? They took $5 million, gave it to Moltex, and another $5 million to another new uranium mixed oxide fuel corporation, and then that company dissolved. And so Moltex was operating on that original numbers, and then the government now, because they had monetary, they had a business up and running, they were employing people, then the government gave them more money each year. And what they want to do is take, which is illegal here in Canada, make mixed oxide fuel for small modular reactors which don't exist. They don't have a license. And just because they were granted a patent, so to speak, don't mean they have a license to build a facility or operate a facility. They just have a patent. But what it is, it'll suck in the investors who don't know any better, don't understand the nuances, and they'll rob these people. And they need to rob hundreds of thousands of investors. And this is what NuScale just done. They stole around $18 billion from investors and didn't build a single reactor, and they're still in business. Unbelievable how evil these people actually are. And they always give you these kooky, stupid-looking sites that'll never look like that. And then it's always on your ocean is going to poison your water for a million years. And Rory O'Sullivan, we've covered many, many times over the last number of years. These are the most degenerate people you'll ever come across. The most revolting, parasitic, despicable, repulsive, arrogant, hubris scumbags you'll ever come across. Does the disgusting nuclear industry have way too many degenerate, despicable, mass-murdering scumbags? And the reason that I came up with that poll was because of Moltex CEO Rory O'Sullivan. That's the reason you see that poll tonight. Because when I read his name, I was like, that disgusting parasite. Radioactive waste site, they're going to put a Chalk River with 1 million tons, which is less than a kilometer, and it's all downhill to the Ottawa River that runs down to, and ultimately fresh water for, 10, 20 million people or something. It ends up in the Great Lakes. It comes all the way down through the St. Lawrence, through Montreal and Quebec, all the way down through New Brunswick, and all the way down to the east coast of Canada into the Atlantic Ocean ultimately. All of it ends up, that don't get hung up somewhere else, ends up in the Atlantic Ocean. And the native community up there they don't understand the big picture. See, they were invited in, they were given all kinds of monetary money for free and all kinds of promises. And the minute they stopped paying attention for 2 minutes, that's when the government cut their throats. There is no Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. If there was, they would close down all the CANDU reactors immediately, right? Japan Noto quakes fuel nuclear safety concerns. And I couldn't highlight anything on this story. Said there's no abnormalities at the nuclear power plant following the earthquake. Well, if there's no abnormalities after an upper 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale earthquake in the basement of the #1 reactor at Shika, then we should get rid of all earthquake regulations worldwide. Because if an upper 5, which is basically an 8.4 on the Richter scale, in the basement of a nuclear power plant doesn't invoke any damage, then I guess I died and I'm on another dimension somewhere. Japan's never-ending reprocessing saga. Japan has a nuclear... They're trying to build a nuclear reprocessing facility. What is it, like 27 years or something? And they're gone over budget by 15 times or something. You can't find that page. Why does this stuff always disappear when I'm looking for it? And now we're seeing a huge amount of volcanoes going off. I think 2023 was one of the biggest years ever recorded for volcano activities. We're seeing lines rupture that are 3,000 or 4,000 years old. And so if you have a big enough volcano going off, you can seriously jeopardize a nuclear power plant. Japan's response to an editorial Japanese water, and the problem with a nuclear power plant is the radioactive fallout doesn't seem to want to stay in the one place. It covers the entire planet. And then it poisons everything with replicating cells for millions of years. So when you look at the model to your left, think of Shika. Think of that model. If it was Shika, it would look exactly like that because that's Fukushima model. And the bottom one is 26 days. So by day 26, the entire planet is blanketed with an invisible blanket of death. And they talk about tritium discharges. Tritium discharge. Like, there is no maps of tritium discharges. The models are all of vicious isotopes. I don't know why the industry is so evil. I just know that I've never seen anybody in the industry that wasn't evil. Neptunium, that's a Neptunium-239 dispersal, which decays to plutonium-239. That model is only based on 20 days. This model is based on 20 days of xenon-133 from Fukushima. You expect the same thing from the fuel pools. And this was another model, I think, is xenon-133 or krypton-95. Xenon-133. And this model is based on 25 days, 26 days or something. And this is from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. But I've seen no models of tritium. I know that's a cesium model. That's a Neptunium model. We also have similar ones like that, which are plutonium models. We know that's a xenon-133 model. That's a xenon-133. We know krypton numbers were incredible. This is a cesium-137 model from France. And this one is based upon 9 days of radioactive fallout. And this was considered 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. So if the Shika nuclear power plant has melted down, This is what it looked like 9 days later. That's the French government now. And this is Norwegian Institute of Air Research says around 25 days. This is the Xenon 133 based on 20 days. This is TEPCO's numbers of Neptunium-239 based on 20 days over there and 21 days here. So the radioactive fallout is very tangible. And so the World Health Organization is the first one to cut your throat every single time. UN hates your guts. There's no other way you can look at it. Fukushima radioactivity among workers, water release is under control. Well, it's not under control. The reactors melted down. What was it? Harla Krishna. He said, we shouldn't investigate Fukushima because everybody likes nuclear. Let me play this, actually. He's a pro-nuclear. He cracks me up. He's what I describe as a weasel.
Krishna, freelance writer for Yuka
Let me
Fuji.
do that again.
Krishna, freelance writer for Yuka Fuji. And I'm a generous member of the Scientists for Accurate Radiation Information. I'm pro-nuclear power generation. Restart of the nuclear plants much more beneficial than worrying too much about the fact-finding or the...
Restarting nuclear is more important than fact-finding or worrying about victims. And a lot of the media come out and show that picture, said it was Fukushima, but that's the Daini plant. It's bizarre. And all of them are always surrounded by farms. When you look in the distance, you'll start seeing farms. Have you eaten sushi recently? What you need to know about radiation. Well, you can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or pick it up, but it sequesters in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. That compromises your immune system. Communist rappers are luring young, disgruntled Chinese. Communist rappers. Times Square video altered to include a humiliating clip of South Korea's Young, the President Young, who said Fukushima didn't happen. Right? Remember that? He's one of the many. I'm always a little horrified by how many people in the nuclear industry are willing to cut your throat on a drop of a hat. It's stunning. Worker burned residents at Fukushima Prefecture facility for the disabled with a hot spoon over and over and over and over. There shouldn't be anybody living in Fukushima Prefecture. They're picked up 30 million one-ton bags there. This was an interesting one. Young clams escaped from tank water near the West Japan port where tons of fish washed up dead. And this is December 22nd. And these tanks, they jumped out of the water. They crawled out of the water where all the fish died. I can't remember, it was over 2 million pounds or something washed up of sardines and anchovies. But these are abalone. I used to harvest them before there was a ban in Canada. I think there was... What year was that? 89 or something? They said they believed it to be caused by a decrease in oxygen concentration in the seawater. Well, generally open ocean can't have hypoxia, right? Because it's open ocean, it's cold water, it's saturated with oxygen. Unless something killed off the phytoplankton, like radioactive fallout. Toyota subsidy shuts down factories after faking safety issues. They also make parts for nuclear power plants. And we covered them, I think it was last year or something. Yeah, it was 2023, where the scandals was unbelievable. How many, it was something like 40 years of faking safety tests on stuff for nuclear power plants and brakes for cars. It was all kinds of weird stuff that finally showed up. Fiji fisherman shares anger at Japan over nuclear waste dump. Again, they interview people who believe only tritium got out of Fukushima. They're very good at covering their trails, aren't they? So you got look at these people. They're pretending they're in the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Let me explain. I got another way of explaining what really happened. First off, 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 fell in North America per liter, which means you saturated the thyroid glands of everything and everybody. And so particularly the insects and the birds in that, would expect them to disappear pretty quick. Like the birds that eat insects in particular. And anything that lives in the forest, we're getting full body x-rays and will for thousands of years. So I've done emergency research expeditions for 6 years. And that's from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And all the marks you see is basically where I dropped anchor and went and done long-term research expeditions. And so I would go out there for 4 to 5 months a year at a time on the ocean and just meandered through the 27,000 islands and looked for the species. So I done this year after year because after the first year we determined the species were exterminated. So now we had to go back, and the reason it's exterminated is because reactors actually melted down. The fallout actually covered the planet. This model is in just 19 days. So we launched emergency research expeditions, and to our absolute unbelievable horror, the species to your left are actually exterminated. They're exterminated. You'll never take the pictures to the left again. These are authentic before and after pictures. And I went back for 6 years or 5 more years after this to see if the species recovered and came back. And the species didn't recover and they never came back, which means they're not coming back, which means we killed the soup of life itself. Because the best way to describe an ocean was a soup of life, that each glass of water would have a billion creatures, and 75 to 100 million of them per glass of water would be the phytoplankton, which is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. But the rest of the water was the eggs and larvae and small fries of this unbelievable diversity, this incredible, just wonderful, amazing coastline that had over 7,000 highly visible species. They were completely annihilated by perpetual radioactive fallout from Japan. And I went back year after year to see if the species recovered. I've been attacked, arrested, demonized, marginalized, smeared. I've been stalked and harassed for the entire time. And the idea is to drive me away, to scare me off, to terrify me and terrorize me. And they've done that. And they know they've done it. They've done it on purpose. But to me, I got no choice but to tell the story and do the research because this is actually happening. And I don't have a right to stop. I don't have a right to give up. And I don't have a right to not come out and try to have a conversation and educate the population. And I do it by bringing you this absurd amount of documentation that takes me all day, every day to put together so that you and your loved ones might have a future if you find the courage and the moral high ground to do the moral and ethical thing. And everything is up at my website, thenuclearproctologist.org. And in these videos, my playlist is full of this. You can get educated in a massive hurry in my playlist. And I apologize, I'm not the most eloquent I'm not beautiful or charming, or I'm not wealthy, independently famous, or anything else. What I do believe in is the truth and complete, utter honesty. And then so I put this whole operation together, and I've been at this nonstop. And my research is unassailable. I provide you GPSs of everywhere I go, and I was taking 1,000, 2,000 pictures a day. And then when I come ashore, I would spend months uploading it to my website. And it's free for everybody. I compiled all the documentation. So this study from France, at 1 million times normal, was based on 9 days of radioactive fallout. And they're talking about 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. This is neptunium-239 dispersals. And the list goes on and on. The evidence is stunning. There was extra 865,000 cancers in 2012. And another thing you might want to remember is that all nuclear power plants, except for a few, are surrounded by farms. And all nuclear power plants' fuel pools are still splitting atoms into your environment. So all nuclear power plants are creating plumes like this every single day. There's 120,000 liters a day. And this industry knows exactly what it's doing. It has no illusions whatsoever. They're not surrounding them by farms because they're bored. They're doing it on purpose to poison you and to denigrate your genetics and your DNA. They're very good at it. They've been at it for 80 years. But it's never too late to make a stand. It's never too late to say enough. It's never too late to be the generation that made a difference. Some generation is going to have to say, well, look, this is actually happening. We just can't sit silent anymore. And it's the most important thing in human history is to stop what is happening like in the nuclear industry. If you can't have a future, you can't have more generations for much longer because you're destroying humanity with perpetual radioactive fallout from all these nuclear power plants. And then poisoning people in the supermarkets on top of that because they're buying food. These plants are not built in farmland accidentally. And it's the only industry that really does that, right? See, just these two, each of these buildings, just one of these buildings, let's say Reactor 4 from Fukushima, is worse than all nuclear meltdowns in history combined. Just one of them. Now, we're not talking about the fuel pools there at the top of the buildings, which could have had at least 10 reactor cores in 2 pools. There's 2 pools at the top of each of the buildings. So, like, we've never seen 2 melted reactors, 100% meltdown in history. But if you go and look, they'll try to convince you, and probably will, that Chernobyl is the world's worst accident. But if you look at what's actually happening, each of these reactors, not counting the fuel pools full of reactor cores, but just the reactor core, is equal to 100 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was graphite, right? So the majority of it was graphite. These were small reactors compared to Fukushima reactors. And at the top of each of Fukushima reactors were 2 fuel pools with decades of reactor cores that were still splitting atoms. And so when they detonated, they burnt like a nuclear meltdown. You had around 10 reactors per building melting down. There's 4 buildings, so that's 40 times 100 Chernobyls melting down. But it's much worse than that because of the toxicity of, say, reactor number. Now, the emissions from these plants are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. Because they're surrounded by farms. So it's very important that you wrap your mind. Not only that, the 50 becquerels a kilogram is the equivalent of 50 atoms per kilogram. And if you can take 200 million atoms on the head of a needle but you can't see it, how difficult is it going to be to detect 50 of them per kilogram? Because you can't perceive it, right? It's so small. You can't separate it. And so if you don't contain everything, then you have to release everything because you can't filter it. It's too small to filter. And that they got tons and tons of studies that know the food uptakes the radiation, sequesters in the food. So what do you think that every nuclear power plant, except for a few, is surrounded by farms? They know that the food is going to suck up the radiation, that you're going to get sick when you eat it. They're not naive, they're not gullible, they're not innocent, they're vicious, degenerate, monstrous scumbags. Or as I like to say, does the disgusting nuclear industry have way too many degenerate, despicable, mass-murdering scumbags? The evidence is overwhelming that they're trying to exterminate you and that plan is well on their way. 16,000 workers quit Fukushima at one point in 2012. It wasn't workers, this was homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language. Nuclear academics, nuclear scientists don't go to Fukushima, period. Does anybody really think that all these nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms is an accident? Because you know better and I know better, right? But they never ever thought for a second that somebody was going to figure this out. They never thought for a second somebody would show up and start fighting back. They disregarded you. And that's their flaw. And so you need to capitalize on that. Because this is your one chance. This is history's one moment. And you are the venue. It's your responsibility. You're obligated. It's your obligation. And there's many solutions to energy, geothermal and hydrogen, for instance. So geothermal, you can, with the technology we got, we can dig anywhere deep enough to get temperatures hotter than nuclear, gas, oil, and coal plants. Geothermal has been around forever. And hydrogen can replace gas and diesel. And so you can use it on trains, planes, helicopters, cars, motorcycles. And then geothermal can power your cities. And they're suppressing everything. And so the last thing I want you to remember about this is that they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation. And the word tritium was never mentioned a single time. 30 million. And that the food was banned by 55 countries, I marked the prefectures, and 14 prefectures for a decade. But yet now, as of 2023, July the 13th, they claim the only thing that got out of the reactors was equal to 3 grams of sugar. And this is a fatal mistake. And they faked reactor 3. That's one of the pictures. You can go read that story where they faked reactor 3. They actually faked it. They've done the same thing for reactor 4. And this is reactor 4 where they faked being in reactor 4. That's the stump of reactor 4. And there was many journalists that faked it. We are being poisoned. Now we have Shika, nuclear meltdown happening. And it's time to make a stand. You're making Earth's last stand. It's time to make a stand. It's time to say no to this bully, hateful industry. And so we got a bit of a short show tonight. My apologies to everybody. I've been exhausted. We've done a 3-hour show on Sunday, or Friday, or Saturday, and then a 2-hour and 20-minute, almost 2.5 hours last night. And I just didn't have enough time to regroup. And so the intention tonight was to try to do a 2-hour show, but it's not going to work. I'm feeling the stress already, so I'm just going to bow out or I'll be dragged out tomorrow night too. We're going to close the poll down. We got a great poll. Thank you, everybody. Does the disgusting nuclear industry have way too many degenerate, despicable, mass-murdering scumbags? We have an overwhelming percent says yeah, Dana. So let's close that down. We'll call it a night. And let me bring in some music. We thank everybody. Yeah, solar and mirrors are better than nuclear. Things change. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night, great day. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I'll get rejuiced back up by tomorrow night. I'll be back hitting harder than ever. Good night, everyone. Take care. Port Angeles, Katja, Blue Jay. Stephen Young is out there. Hi, Stephen. Albert and everybody. I see everybody on the other side. We thank everybody. Paul C. donated $25 last night. Thank you, Paul. And we'll catch everybody on the other side tomorrow night. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody.